Hi, I'm the True Gamer, giving up my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. So, Hi-Fi Rush. What a game. It was a game that was released out of nowhere and it became a huge hit because, well, it was a good game. And I honestly can't disagree with the assessment. In fact, this game will be getting a good amount of praise, though I will say some negative stuff that I honestly felt should have been said about the game. Since as a whole, the game feels lacking, but not in the way that some games are, where they feel just bad because they feel unfinished. More in that sense of what could have been and interesting to think about at times. You know what I mean? And I only wanted to preface it by saying that because, again, I think it's a good game. I'm just saying that so that way we are okay and understanding what I'm about to do. Because really, let's be clear about this. People will take it the wrong way anyway, I'm just covering my ass. But I've been talking on a little too long, so let's get into gear, start up the music as we start Hi-Fi Rush. The game begins with our main character, Chai, walking out as he waits to join up with the Vandalay Corporation. Why he's doing this will be explained later because it deals with some things I really want to talk about. In any case, he becomes part of the Armstrong Project, a project that was basically designed by the corporation to get test subjects to get people to have augments on them, for reasons that we will get into later. After Chai gets strapped in, we basically learn that, there's a very nefarious reason for why they're planning on doing this, though it's not revealed till later, as the evil boss tosses down Chai's MP3 player, which is really weird when you start thinking about it for a moment, but in any case, it lands on him, which accidentally causes some issues for him, like now making his heart an MP3 player. Yeah, that should just set the tone for the entire game, and it at least fits very nicely. Usually, I'm of the opinion that the beginning should always let the vibe be there, or at least show off what it's going to be like. It's always a good idea to make sure that the audience gets to where you want them to be. Where I'm guessing is where they want us to be like, don't take it too seriously, which is fine as long as it tells an interesting story like Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, which they usually do. We'll get into those games someday. I just wanted to comment on it because it does its job very nicely. In any case, after that, Chai now sees the world in rhythm, which is core to the gameplay and everything else, and I mean everything follows it. To the environments, the enemies, and even Chai himself will follow this rhythm. And where I will begin talking about the gameplay, which is rare for me to do this early, but, And here's where my background in music actually comes into play, and it's really interesting to talk about, so let's talk about it. See, as I mentioned before, combat, everything follows the beat, or at least the rhythm. It's a little more complicated, but sometimes we use that term interchangeably, but another time. Though I am not certain of this entirely, so I can just, say that aloud. Assuming that this game goes off the idea of the basic 4x4 meter, which I can assume is the deal due to how combos work at times, it all runs on a 4x4 meter, which is usually the standard in particularly rock. But let's explain this. A meter is basically where the notes are, and this is a time signature. Basically, it tells you how much a beat it's worth and how many beats are in a meter. So, for example, your light attack is a quarter note, and you can play 4 quarter notes or 4 light attacks in a combo. For heavy attacks, a little different, because they're half note that take longer than, a quarter note, and will take 2 meters to do one combo with all heavy attacks. There are also even rest combos, or pause combos if you prefer, where basically if you stop for a moment in a beat to pause or rest, you can actually perform a different attack, which is really interesting and neat. And at the tail end of a combo, you can actually do a synchronized attack. A synchronized attack is where you pause for a moment, and when the circle comes into another circle and press it when they meet, you get to do a heavy hitting attack that deals a lot of damage. And also cool to look at. However, there was a problem for me, and I don't blame the game entirely for this. We'll get into that in a bit. I had always a problem being on beat. Okay, let me explain. See, everything's on beat, including enemies. However, Problem is, they will decide to attack you even when you're doing a sync move. Well, except for a few moves, for the most part, when you're doing these sync attacks, you're basically stuck. But enemies who might attack you halfway through a sync attack might just hit you through no fault of your own to be able to get away from that. It's really not helped with one other thing that really got on my nerves, where enemies can attack you when they're not on screen, which is really confusing. You see, a lot of action games actually try to prevent this sort of thing, since it's really unfair to the player at times, since they couldn't see it coming. And they don't even bother to tell you or give you that hint of it's going to happen. It's just boop, you're hit. Though ironically, unlike other action games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, this game doesn't punish you that much, I'll get into that, when getting hit, except for life, but still. Actually, the game does have a ranking system, which, how does it rank you? Well, you see, you rank up based on your combo, which is determined by the number of attacks you're using, and like Devil May Cry, it does like repeats, and the gauge right here tells you how much of a bonus you're going to get at the end of a combo. And it also rewards timing up with it. Not in the way that I mentioned earlier, but kinda, let me explain. You see, everything's on rhythm, or on beat. So being on beat with each attack gives you more bonuses, like more damage and more points. Which is a good way to make players play the way you want them to. Because punishing them for playing how they want to is always a bad idea, because it just leaves a bad taste in their mouths. And even then, the game doesn't punish you for not being on beat. It just rewards you for, again, playing the way they want you to. And it did help me out over time, though I think I would have liked it if the game gave me a metronome. Since sometimes the game's beats were a little hard to follow, since, you're gonna follow a lot of things on screen and sometimes you're ignoring the music by accident. And I mean, the game is nice enough to actually give you a little visual cues to get you back on the beat. I'm just saying, I think I would have just worked better if I had more of a sound metronome at times. And in any case, the final thing the game judges you on is your time, just doing it quickly. Honestly, it's a good, solid foundation for a good hack-and-slash game. But the game's not done yet, as it also has special attacks, which sadly I didn't get into much because I will actually need to combine this with the layout of the game because it's a little more tied to that. In any case, these moves are hard-hitting moves that are sort of situational. See, sometimes these moves can be like a hitting move, or a moving attack, or a short-range attack that can deal a lot of damage. But since everything can move while you're using them, they can sometimes just flub. So I just stick to the simple stuff and the healing one, since, it's nice to heal at times. Though speaking on healing, another issue I had, but it wasn't really a big problem, was that enemies hit for a lot. I was surprised about just the amount of damage they deal at times, but it is still manageable. In fact, I took a lot of damage throughout the entire game. A good chunk of it was through combat, but some of it was through the platforming. Which, yeah, there's a lot of platforming in this game, more than you would think. I see about half the game is just platforming. That's not to say it's bad, it was just weird, And it's also how you'll regain both health and battery power, since battery power is lost after every fight, which is how you use your special attacks. This is also where you will find a lot of upgrade parts that, can make you survive battles better, but also find more chips. Yeah, later on, Chai can put in chips into himself to make him better, but for the most part, you'll just stick to the ones that make your partners cool down faster. Yes, because one of the other mechanics allows you to call up one of your partners to the battlefield to allow them to help you progress or in combat. And while yes, they can be helpful, but the problem is that a good chunk of the time, they hinder. Well, that's more because of what they need to do rather than them in particular. I know that sounds weird, let me explain. See, for whatever reason, the game added the baffling mechanic that's just weird. Basically, you need your partners to deal a certain type of damage to certain foes, which is really bizarre because all it does is slow down the game a lot. And oddly enough, it was one of the biggest problems with the DMC reboot because nobody liked it there, because all it does is stall the game so that you can't do your certain combos, but just hit the enemies with a certain weapon that you might not even like. It's also not helped with the lack of control you have over them, because sometimes you'll just focus on anything but the thing you actually want them to target, like I mentioned, because Peppermint and Macaroon are good against their respective enemies, but for some strange reason won't auto-target the thing that they're good against, for some reason. Which, if they miss, you'll just have to wait until you can use them again, which is really annoying. And this is also weird when you realize Corsica doesn't have this sort of issue. Which, spoilers by the way, sorry about that. You see, Corsica can handle fire enemies, who you can still fight even if they're on fire. It just helps to stop them from burning the field and making it hard to move. Which is, all honesty, a better use of the mechanic, since you could still fight them as you normally would. All it does is just help you negate their issues. And honestly, I think the reason they did this was because she was introduced halfway through the game, so they didn't want to make a new type of enemy that you also have to watch out for, because again, you might not be able to handle them immediately. And actually thinking on it now, most types of enemies don't really appear one another, or at least all three of them don't appear on the same battlefield, which is really weird when you start thinking about it. Actually, talking about enemy layout, they'll usually come out in waves of 2, sometimes 3, with mostly 5 to lower types of enemies in them, since certain types of enemies don't work well with each other at times, which brings me on to the last mechanic of the game, that being parrying. You see, at multiple times throughout the game will force you to, well, parry. Which it's done decently, as most times than not, well, except for bosses, we'll get into that in a moment, will always, attack on beat, so parrying them is a lot easier. And really, it's fun to do, except when it forces you to. Like, I get it at first, the game wants to introduce this mechanic in a way so that you, the player, can understand it, but every time after that, it felt annoying, especially during the Corsica boss fight. You see, certain big enemies will force you into these parry force mechanics, where basically they'll force you to parry their attacks, or else you'll get damage, but if you do it right, you can deal a lot of damage to them, which will more times than not kill them outright. Bosses, on the other hand, will just force you to parry them multiple times, which got really old really fast. Not to say that it's bad, it just got a little boring. And honestly, even without any of the faults that I mentioned, I still overall think that the gameplay is solid and still fun to play. Hell, I'll probably play it again just to have a mastery over it. Though the story is something I'm more going to take a little more. While I overall liked the story of the game, I felt it was overall lacking. Summarizing the plot really quickly so I can get to specific points that I can get to. So Chai, after escaping, with the help of Peppermint and her cat 808, which is weird in a way because Chai has a better connection to the cat than Peppermint at times. I'm just mentioning it because it's weird. I know about the synchronicity thing, but you'd think she would be more fond of Peppermint. In any case, she wants help to take down the bosses of the Vandalay Corporation so that they can learn what the heck they're planning, which involves Project Armstrong. Chai goes along with this, and after speeding some of the bosses with the help of Macaron, who was with the company since the beginning, we basically learned that their real plan is to brainwash people, though more details on it in a bit. And after recruiting Corsica to join our side after head trauma, joking of course, they decide to take him down for good, where we learn his actual plan is to just make people buy his product, not mind control people. Which is really weird when you start thinking about it, but whatever. And we kill him. Yeah, that part is really weird when you actually realize it. Most of the bosses are straight up dead. And I mean, like, the only ones who I can presume are still alive are Corsica because, well, she's still alive, and Rookford, who was crushed. Unless he died by the crushing, which... I also forgot to mention Zanzo for some reason. I thought he died, but he didn't. And weirdly enough, I don't really talk about Zanzo that much, even though he's really funny at times. I mean, heck, he's a walking JoJo reference. For God's sakes. They did it a little too much, but it's still fine. I'm just stating that's weird because you would think that Peppermint would have some weird issue with this because, she is, in a sense, killing her brother. And it actually hurts me worse killing him because he's voiced by my lord and savior Takehito Koyasu in the Japanese version. So yeah, that sucks. And the deal with Peppermint being Kale's sister is foreshadowed in the game, which is really done well. Which I wish there was more of it in the game, because sadly my biggest problem with the plot is a lack of a through line. For example, the game has a weird moment at the end where you want to go back to the HQ that Peppermint implies that Chai gained the lesson of, and it's a weird lesson when you really start thinking about it, because we'll get into that there is no easy road to success, which is a fine message. However, the problem is it's not built up that well. Like, when is that ever a reason for why Chai wanted to join up to begin with? One of my friends, I think I can get away with that, said that he joined because of his arm. Which is cool and all, but why is that not explained or his deal to begin with? Like, I honestly had no idea what was the deal with his arm to begin with. Nor still do now. I honestly thought he had his arm in a sling just because, and not because of him being unable to use it. Because in one cutscene, he's able to use it, just nowhere else. And granted, it might just be an animation mistake done by someone who didn't know that fact, so mulligan, but my point stands that there should have been an explanation of what's with his arm. Now, I'm not saying that lesson couldn't have worked, it's just that it was improperly built. Like, for example, during the final section of the game, there's a moment where Chai loses all hope for a moment. Due to, well, he thought he was a rock star, but is only able to get anywhere because of his arm. I thought there would be a moment where he would ponder on it for a bit about his position and explain to everyone why he even got it to begin with. Because maybe you can say just because he didn't have his arm, he felt like he couldn't become a rock star, and he felt like this was an easy way to become that with the augment to begin with. And I thought it would add more pathos to his character, which there still is, by the way, it's just not that much. And I thought it would become a revelation to him that he always had the dream within him, and that the arm, while a tool, was always a stepping stone to the path to becoming a rock star. And honestly, that would have pushed me to actually loving the game then rather than just really enjoying it. That would have actually given him more depth rather than just being a dumbass. Though that's not to say that he wasn't an enjoyable dumbass, I just would have wanted more. And I just want to repeat, I don't think the characters are bad, I just think there are just some things that could have been more used. For example, Rookfort. Yeah, this guy? Here's something I didn't know until I looked it up for my own sake. Apparently before the game, he was dying, and Kale basically provided him the technology to keep on living, and is why he's helping Kale to begin with. Which is really interesting, and it's weird that the game doesn't want to actually show that off more. I know in some regard this would have made it a little more less black and white, but at the same time, Kale is still the ultimate big bad of the game. So, I just think, again, it would give the characters more depth. Though that's not even to say I wasn't even interested in the characters, because I really did like the characters all. And I think it was really, really helped with the animation, because good lord, that animation. That's some good animation. I've always been the opinion of art style will always be better than better graphics. And this game's style is just really, really good. Like, whenever the art book for this game comes out, because I promise you, there will be, I'm going to be one of the first few people to actually buy it because, god damn, this game looks good. There was also some 2D animation that make me just want this thing to become a show as well. Go on, do it, you cowards! I'm just saying because it's really well done as well. And I think it's all helped with just how smoothly everything is animated. It's just really well done. Heck, there's some character customization in the game as well. Which is weird that it's only available after beating the game, which you would think that would have been included in the base, or at least while you're playing, to make it more interesting. Actually, you don't gain level select until you beat the game as well, which is really weird because, again, I thought that would have been already included, due to the nature of the game as, well, a mission style game. And I'm only mentioning this is because after every chapter, I usually stop the game to make sure that all the recording stuff is fine, but also just to meet up with the other characters in the HQ, which the game won't tell you you can do that at times. Which is really weird because a lot of that dialogue is pretty good. It's what made me like these characters a lot. I also did it to buy more stuff for every chapter because sometimes chapters don't give you the market immediately. And it's actually now where I want to talk about the special attack. Because of those you can't replay missions, it means that I wasn't able to gain all these special attacks. So it just became a sunk cost where I just didn't want to bother with that. I just thought that would be important to mention here, where it's all being mentioned together, so we're clear. But again, I usually only came back to the HQ to listen to the dialogue, because again, this dialogue is pretty damn good. I was always more neutral on Korska until I actually started talking to her during these moments in between the game. And it's really why I started to actually like her as a character. Hell, one of my friends, I think I can get away with that still, actually got a tattoo of her, which is really cool in some regard. I think that's also helped because their boss music is just awesome. I know I don't usually talk about the music, but my god, the music. Like, if anyone complained to me that this music was bad, I would say get the fuck out of here and we will never talk again. Because that's how good the music is. I mean, sure, I complained about the music not having a solid beat at times, but that was just me having an issue just getting into the beat. Not because the music was bad. Hell, each stage has unique music tied to it, plus also the fights in them as well, which is really good too. Like, I can't even stress to you. The boss tracks are really well done. I mean, the one for this game, and not the ones they put in, since I actually don't like when games put in licensed music in the game. That's just me. I just really don't like them. But in any case, the boss tracks. Mimosa's boss theme is just stellar. Kale's theme is actually pretty good. Actually really better than the 9 Inch Nails songs in it. And in the end, this game's music is just good. At the end of the day, while I critiqued this game a lot and said something about it that were a little more harsher than I wanted to, I overall still love this game and will wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who wants to try it. Because it's that good of a game. Sadly, the next game will not be such. Next time, Gungrave Gore.